The hologram flickered 3 times before Ambassador Trell could bring himself to activate it. His feathers, normally a proud azure blue, had faded to a dull gray over the past months. 53 worlds. That was the count now. 53 coalition planets reduced to barren husks, stripped of all biological matter by the swarm. The insectoid monsters moved like a plague across the galaxy, and the coalition's peaceful weapons couldn't even scratch their armored bodies. Trell's talons trembled as he finally pressed the activation button. The hologram burst to life, displaying a blue and green world spinning peacefully in its star's embrace. Earth. The application for coalition membership had arrived 50 years ago and had been filed away. Rejected without serious consideration, the reports labeled humans as primitively aggressive and their world as catastrophically hostile to civilized life. Now, those same qualities might be the only thing that could save them all. High Chancellor Orin materialized beside Trell, her translucent body rippling with concern. As a Deepkin, she had evolved in the peaceful depths of her homeworld's oceans, where conflict meant simply swimming away. Her people had never known predation, never experienced the need to fight for survival. None of the coalition species had. They were farmers, philosophers, artists. They built wonders and explored the cosmos with open hearts. The council has voted, Orin said quietly. We will make contact. Trell felt his crop tighten. They will think us hypocrites. We rejected their membership because we called them violent. We rejected them because we were afraid. Orin's voice carried the weight of regret. We saw their history files. The wars, the weapons, the way they hurt each other. We thought ourselves superior in our peace. And now we beg those same warriors to save us. Orin moved closer, her form casting strange light patterns across the room. I have reviewed the human files extensively. They are indeed violent by our standards. But there is something else in their records. They call it heroism. They die for strangers. They fight not just for themselves, but for ideas, for others, for those who cannot fight. Trell pulled up a human historical document on his display. Images of soldiers carrying wounded comrades, of civilians protecting children who weren't their own, of people rushing toward danger instead of away from it. These Deathworld creatures had something the Coalition lacked. They had learned to transform their violence into protection. I will go, Trell said. I will be the one to ask them. The journey to New Perth, humanity's first established colony beyond their solar system, took 3 weeks through Coalition jump gates. Trell used the time to study everything available about humans. Their biology horrified him. They had evolved on a world with crushing gravity where poisonous oxygen filled the air. Massive predators had hunted their ancestors, forcing them to develop tool use, pack tactics, and abstract thinking just to survive each day. Their bodies healed from wounds that would kill most Coalition species. They could function with significant injuries, push past pain through sheer determination. Most disturbing were the human weapons. While Coalition forces used electromagnetic pulse rifles designed to disable and stun, humans had developed chemical projectile weapons that tore through flesh. They created bombs that could level cities. They had actually used nuclear fission as a weapon against their own species. What kind of beings did such things? New Perth appeared on his view screen, a small settlement of prefabricated domes on a rocky moon. Trell's ship landed gently and he forced his legs to carry him down the ramp. Gravity hit him like a physical blow. The moon's pull was only 0.7 standard, but it still felt immense compared to his homeworld's 0.3. How did humans function in a full-gravity environment? David Ross waited at the landing pad, and Trell understood immediately why humans were called Deathworlders. The man stood nearly twice Trell's height, his body thick with muscle required to move in heavy gravity. His eyes tracked everything, predator's eyes that faced forward for hunting rather than to the sides for watching. When Ross smiled in greeting, Trell glimpsed the flat grinding teeth and sharp canines, an omnivore's mouth, designed to eat both plants and meat. Ambassador Trell, Ross said, his voice a deep rumble. This is unexpected. Earth has been trying to contact the Coalition for decades. I know. Trell fought to keep his voice steady. We made a mistake. We judged you too quickly. Dr. Nadia Petrov joined them, her movements quick and efficient. Another predator trait. Humans wasted no energy, every action purposeful. She guided them to a meeting room where Lieutenant Sam Foster waited, studying a datapad with intense focus. Trell began without preamble. The Coalition is dying. A species we call the swarm is consuming our worlds. Our weapons cannot harm them. Our soldiers are not trained to kill. We have always been peaceful peoples, and now that peace is destroying us. Ross exchanged glances with Petrov. You want our help? We need warriors. The word tasted bitter in Trell's beak. We need people who understand violence, who can fight and kill without hesitation. We need deathworlders. Foster looked up from his datapad. You rejected Earth's membership application because you called us too aggressive to join civilized society. Now you want us to solve your problems with that same aggression? Yes. Trell met the human's gaze, though every instinct screamed at him to look away from those predator eyes. We were wrong to judge you. We thought peace was the highest virtue, that any species capable of violence was inferior. But we only had the luxury of peace because we evolved on kind worlds. You survived on a planet that tried to kill you every day. You learned things we never had to learn. Petrov leaned forward. Show us what you're facing. Trell activated his holodisplay. Images appeared of the swarm. Insectoid creatures as large as ground vehicles, their carapaces gleaming black, mandibles dripping with digestive acids. Footage showed them overwhelming coalition defense forces, shrugging off stun pulses, tearing through ceremonial armor like paper. They operate as a hive mind, Trell explained. Individually, they are mindless. Together, they form a distributed intelligence that coordinates across entire star systems. They consume all biological matter to fuel their reproduction. Every planet they take, they gain more resources to create more swarm. Ross studied the images with a tactical eye. Your weapons? Designed to disable, not kill. The strongest setting on our rifles might stun a swarm drone for a few seconds. Our military doctrine has always been defensive posturing to discourage conflict. We have no concept of offensive warfare. No orbital weapons, no kinetic strikes, no chemical or biological countermeasures. We find such things abhorrent. Foster's expression hardened. But you'll let us use them. Trell's feathers flattened in shame. We are desperate. 23 trillion lives have been lost. If we do nothing, the swarm will consume everything. Our children, our cultures, our histories, all of it will be digested and turned into more monsters. Silence filled the room. Trell could hear his own heart's beating, could feel the weight of billions of lives pressing down on him. He had come begging for help from beings his people had rejected as barbaric. The irony was crushing. Petrov broke the silence. You understand what you're asking? You want humans to bring our weapons, our tactics, our willingness to kill. Once we help you win this war, you can't unknow what we show you. The coalition will be changed forever. I know. Trell's voice barely qualified as a whisper. But unchanged, we will be extinct. Ross stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the stars. I need to contact Earth Command. This isn't a decision 3 colonists can make. But personally, he turned back to face Trell. Personally, I think most humans will jump at the chance to help. It's what we do. We run toward the danger to protect others. Trell felt something unfamiliar, hope. These violent deathworlders, these creatures his people had feared and rejected, were considering risking their lives for strangers. Maybe Oren had been right. Maybe there was more to humanity than violence. How long until you have an answer? Trell asked. Earth is 3 weeks away by message drone, but I'm betting Command's response will be simple. Where do you need us and how many do you need? Within hours, the message was sent. Within days, it reached Earth. Within a week, the response came back, and it was even simpler than Ross had predicted. Send coordinates. We're coming. 200 volunteers assembled within a month. Soldiers, engineers, medics, tacticians, humanity's warriors prepared to travel to the coalition to face an enemy that had broken an entire galactic civilization. They packed their weapons, their armor, their determination. Ambassador Trell watched the first human transport ship dock with Station Harmony, and he felt his feathers rise in primal fear. The coalition had asked for help. The Deathworlders were delivering an arsenal. Everything was about to change. Medical Officer Isla Wright had seen many strange things during her 12 years in the service, but nothing prepared her for the look of absolute horror on the Lith-born physician's face when she bit into her protein bar. The crystalline being actually recoiled, its faceted body refracting light in patterns that their translation software marked as profound disgust. You consume other organisms, the physician stated, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. You take biological matter into your body and destroy it. Isla paused mid-chew. Around her in the medical bay, Other human volunteers had frozen in similar states of eating. They had been on Station Harmony for 3 days, and apparently nobody had thought to warn the Coalition about human dietary requirements. How else would we eat? Private Owen Blake asked, genuinely confused. The Lithborn physician gestured to a wall panel where a soft blue light glowed. Photosynthesis. Direct energy absorption. We do not murder other life forms to sustain ourselves. Sergeant Rita Huang set down her meal pack carefully. With respect, Doctor, we evolved as omnivores. Our bodies require proteins, fats, and nutrients we can only get from consuming other organisms. We can't photosynthesize. Barbaric, another Coalition medical officer whispered, a being that looked like a floating collection of bioluminescent jellyfish tendrils. Truly, they are deathworlders. Commander Idris entered the medical bay, his crystalline body somehow conveying authority despite lacking a face as humans understood it. As the Coalition's military coordinator, he had been assigned to oversee the human integration. So far, that integration was going poorly. There has been a disturbance in Training Room 7, Idris announced. His voice carried harmonics that the translation software rendered as stern. 3 Coalition soldiers are in the medical wing. The humans claim it was an accident during basic sparring exercises. Isla's heart sank. She had warned Command about this. Humans didn't understand their own strength compared to species that evolved in low-gravity, peaceful environments. They followed Idris to the medical wing where 3 beings lay on recovery platforms, a skyborn with several bent wing structures, a deepkin with a cracked carapace section, and a small furred creature whose translator tag identified it as softpaw, showing signs of impact trauma. None of the injuries looked life-threatening, but the Coalition medical staff treated them like catastrophic wounds. Rita found the incident report. It says here that Private Blake was demonstrating a basic deflection technique. The Skyborn asked him to use realistic force. Realistic force? Idris's harmonics climbed. Look what your realistic force accomplished. Owen stood nearby, looking miserable. At 19, he was one of the youngest volunteers, eager to prove himself. Now he looked ready to cry. I barely touched them. I swear it was softer than we train with on Earth. Sergeant Huang hits me harder every day. Rita nodded confirmation. He's not exaggerating. That level of contact wouldn't even leave a bruise on a human. Our training is much more intensive because our bodies can handle it. A medical officer approached with a data pad, its appendages trembling. We have completed the physical assessments of all human volunteers. The results are deeply troubling. Idris took the data pad and scrolled through it. His body's light patterns shifted rapidly. This cannot be accurate. It states that humans possess redundant organ systems. 2 kidneys, 2 lungs, backup blood vessels, Isla confirmed. Our bodies evolved with redundancy because injury and illness were so common. If one system fails, we have backups. Your bone density is 3 times that of the average Coalition species. We evolved in 1-gravity environments. Our skeletons had to be strong enough to support our weight against constant pull. Your pain tolerance is marked as exceptionally high. Pain is a warning signal, Rita explained. But on Earth, if every pain stopped you, you'd never survive. We evolved to push through it, to keep functioning even when injured. Idris set down the datapad. There's also mention of something called an adrenaline response. Isla nodded. When threatened or injured, our bodies flood with hormones that increase strength, speed, and reduce pain sensation. It's an emergency survival mechanism. You become more dangerous when wounded? Idris's tone suggested he found this concept utterly alien. Basically, yes. The medical staff exchanged what their translation software marked as alarmed communications. One of them spoke up, a being that resembled a collection of floating leaves. You are biologically over-engineered for survival. Your bodies are designed for a world trying to kill you. No wonder you succeeded where we have failed. David Ross arrived with Lieutenant Sam Foster and Dr. Nadia Petrov. They had been meeting with Coalition military leadership about weapons and tactics. The meeting had apparently not gone well. They rejected our request to import human weapons, Sam said bluntly, called them barbaric instruments of murder. Rita's jaw tightened. They asked us here to fight. How are we supposed to fight with weapons designed to tickle the enemy? Nadia pulled up holographic displays. I've been analyzing the swarm biology. Their carapaces are composed of a carbon silicate composite that's nearly impervious to electromagnetic pulses. Coalition weapons are essentially useless against them. The swarm evolved on a high-gravity world with extreme predation. They're deathworlders, too. just without the intelligence to develop civilization on their own. Until they met the Hive Queen, Ross added grimly. Intelligence directing deathworlder biology. That's why the Coalition is losing. Idris's harmonics carried frustration. The Coalition Council debates the ethics of importing human weapons. Many members argue that using such devices would compromise our fundamental values. Your fundamental values will be digested by the swarm, Rita said flatly. We're not here to judge your ethics. We're here because you asked for help. But we can't help if you tie our hands. Ambassador Trell entered the medical wing, his gray feathers looking even more faded than before. I have news. The swarm attacked the outer colony of Virtus 3 2 hours ago. Coalition defense forces are being overwhelmed. Casualty estimates are already in the thousands. The room fell silent. Even the Coalition medical staff stopped their ministrations. How long until the colony is lost? Ross asked. 4 hours, perhaps less. Evacuation ships are inbound, but they need time to load civilians. Sam pulled up tactical displays. Someone needs to buy them that time. A holding action, defensive positions to slow the swarm advance. Trell's feathers flattened. Our remaining forces on Virtus 3 number fewer than 300. They have standard Coalition weapons. Against the swarm, they might delay the advance by minutes at best. Rita looked at Ross. Sir, we're 200 strong. If we deploy now, with Coalition weapons that don't work, Ross cut her off. We'd be throwing lives away. Coalition weapons are all we have, Sam said quietly. Unless the Council changes its mind in the next hour. Owen spoke up, his voice steadier than before. What if we don't use weapons at all? What if we improvise? Nadia turned to him. Explain. The colony has industrial equipment, right? Mining charges, fuel reserves, construction vehicles. My background is engineering. Give me access to that equipment and I can make things that go boom. Rita's eyes lit up. Improvised explosives. Not weapons, just tools being repurposed. The Council cannot object to our using existing colony resources, Trell said slowly. You would not be importing weapons. You would be adapting local materials. Idris's harmonics shifted to something the translator marked as reluctant admiration. This is the kind of lateral thinking Coalition military has never developed. We follow rules, protocols. You rewrite them in real time. Ross made his decision. Get me a transport. All human volunteers, full deployment. Owen, you're on explosives. Rita, you're coordinating ground tactics. Sam, overall command. Isla, field medicine. We'll need Coalition support, Sam added. Intelligence on swarm movements, communication networks, evacuation coordination. You will have it, Idris promised. I will accompany you. If humans are willing to fight for Coalition civilians, the least I can do is witness your methods. Within 30 minutes, 200 human volunteers were boarding transports. They carried Coalition-issue weapons they knew wouldn't work, medical supplies that seemed laughably inadequate by human standards, and determination that the Coalition was beginning to understand might be humanity's most dangerous weapon. Trell watched the transports launch and felt his crop twist with guilt. He had brought these Deathworlders here, had asked them to save the Coalition. Now they were flying toward almost certain death armed with weapons that wouldn't harm the enemy, and materials they would have to improvise into defenses on the fly. Nadia stood beside him, her predator eyes tracking the departing ships. You're wondering if you made a mistake asking us here. I am wondering if I have condemned you all. Maybe. She smiled, a very human expression showing teeth. But Owen was right about something. Humans are really good at improvising. Give us a problem and inadequate resources and we'll find a way. That's what Deathworlders do. We survive. The transports disappeared into the black, racing toward Virtus 3 where the swarm was already overwhelming the defenses. 4 hours until the colony fell. 200 humans with ineffective weapons against thousands of monsters that had broken the Coalition military. The odds were impossible. But then again, humans had evolved on a world where impossible was just another word for Tuesday. Virtus 3 burned under an orange sun, and Sergeant Leo Grant had exactly 20 minutes to turn mining equipment into something that could kill monsters. The colony's industrial sector spread before him like a toy box of volatile materials, fuel cells, chemical processing tanks, mining charges designed for fracturing rock, all of it usable if you knew what you were doing and didn't mind the risk of blowing yourself up. Leo knew exactly what he was doing. He just really minded the risk. "Owen, grab those fuel cells," he shouted over the screaming alarms. 12 of them. Rita, I need detonators from the mining storage. Anything that can take a remote signal. Private Owen Blake moved with surprising efficiency for a teenager who had probably never seen combat before yesterday. Rita Huang directed other volunteers to haul equipment while Lieutenant Sam Foster coordinated defensive positions using a commandeered construction vehicle as his command post. The swarm was 3 kilometers out and closing. Through his field glasses, Leo could see them swarming over the colony's outer structures like ants, their black carapaces gleaming, mandibles working constantly. Coalition defenders fired their pulse weapons uselessly, the electromagnetic bursts washing over the swarm drones without effect. One by one, those defenders were being torn apart. Coalition forces are in full retreat, Sam reported over the comm. Civilian evacuation ships need 90 minutes to load and launch. We need to hold the eastern approach to the landing pads. 90 minutes. Leo looked at the improvised devices Owen was helping him assemble. They had maybe 20 explosive charges that might work, and thousands of swarm drones incoming. The math was not encouraging. Commander Idris materialized beside Leo, his crystalline body refracting the orange sunlight into rainbow patterns. In coalition military doctrine, we would already be evacuating. This position is indefensible. Good thing we don't follow coalition military doctrine, Leo muttered, wiring a detonator to a cluster of fuel cells. Owen, how are those secondary charges coming? 5 ready, working on more. Owen's hands moved steadily despite the tremor in his voice. The kid was scared but functional. That was all you could ask. Rita approached with a tactical map displayed on a stolen datapad. Sam wants shaped charges along the eastern canyon. Funnel them into a kill zone where we can concentrate fire. Concentrate ineffective fire, Leo corrected. Coalition weapons won't scratch them. Then we don't use coalition weapons. Rita gestured to the construction equipment. Those vehicles have industrial plasma cutters for rock excavation. Plasma hot enough to melt stone might do something to swarm carapaces. Leo paused his work to stare at her. You want to fight giant insect monsters in melee range with mining equipment? You got a better idea? He didn't. Leo finished wiring his improvised bomb and moved to the next one. Behind them, the first evacuation ships were landing, their engines whining as panicked civilians rushed aboard. Coalition guards tried to maintain order, but Leo could see the fear in their movements. These people had never experienced war, never trained for catastrophe. Peace had made them soft. The ground trembled. Leo's combat instincts screamed at him to find cover. Instead, he calmly finished wiring the detonator and armed the device. Charges are set, he announced. Owen, fall back to secondary positions. Everyone else get to your assigned zones. When those bugs hit the canyon, I'm turning them into paste. The 200 human volunteers spread across defensive positions that would have made coalition military instructors weep. There were no proper trenches, no established fields of fire, no supply lines, just improvised barricades, stolen industrial equipment, and grim determination. Private Luca Moreno found himself on a rooftop with a coalition-issue rifle that he already knew wouldn't work and a pair of field glasses. As a designated marksman, his job was to identify priority targets and coordinate fire. Except the fire wouldn't hurt the targets, so really his job was to watch people die and report on it. Contact, he called over the comm. First wave entering the canyon. Estimate 1,200 drones, 1,200. Against 200 humans with weapons that didn't work. The mathematics of extinction stared Luca in the face. Then Leo's voice crackled over the comm, steady as stone. Let them get deeper. Wait for it, wait. The swarm filled the canyon like a flood of chittering death. Their mandibles clicked in unison, creating a sound like hail on metal. Coalition survivors fled before them, abandoning equipment and positions. Now, Leo whispered. The canyon erupted. Leo's improvised explosives detonated in sequence, fuel cells rupturing and igniting, mining charges fracturing the canyon walls. Rock and fire cascaded down on the swarm, and for the first time since this war began, the monsters died. Not all of them. Maybe not even most of them. But dozens fell, crushed under tons of stone or consumed by chemical fires that burned hot enough to crack their carapaces. The swarm hesitated, and in that moment of confusion, Luca understood something profound. They could be hurt. They could be killed. You just had to be willing to use sufficient violence. Rita's voice came over the comm, fierce and alive. All units, engage. Plasma cutters target the joints where their carapaces meet. That's the weak point. Human volunteers charged forward in coordinated teams, using construction vehicles as assault platforms. Industrial plasma cutters designed for slicing through solid rock found purchase in swarm biology. It wasn't elegant. It was butchery conducted with mining equipment. But it worked. Medical Officer Isla Wright worked in a hastily established aid station, treating wounded humans and coalition survivors alike. A skyborn soldier was brought in, his wing nearly severed by swarm mandibles. By coalition medical standards, the wound was fatal. Isla looked at the injury with combat medic's eyes and saw something fixable. "Hold him down," she ordered. Coalition medical staff stared at her in horror as she pulled out tools that looked more like construction equipment than surgical instruments. Human field medicine was aggressive, invasive, and effective. She clamped vessels, sutured tissue, and stabilized the wing with brutal efficiency. "You cut into him," a coalition medic whispered, appalled. "You caused additional trauma." "I saved his life," Isla corrected. "Your medicine is gentle and careful. Mine is fast and functional. Right now, functional is what keeps people breathing." The Skyborn lived. So did the next patient and the next. Coalition medical staff watched in fascinated horror as Isla's aggressive techniques saved lives they would have written off as lost. On the front line, Sam coordinated the human defense with the cold precision of someone who understood that hesitation meant death. He reorganized coalition survivors into the human formations, teaching them on the fly how to fight in teams, how to cover each other, how to use crossfire and overlapping fields. "Stop trying to disable them," he shouted at a group of coalition soldiers still using their pulse weapons. "Either find something that kills or fall back and help with evacuation." A swarm warrior broke through the line, its massive form bearing down on a cluster of civilians. Sergeant Rita Huang intercepted it, using nothing but human strength and desperate courage. She rolled under its strike, came up inside its guard, and drove an industrial spike through the joint where its head met its thorax. The monster convulsed and fell. Coalition observers watched in shock. A human had killed a swarm warrior in hand-to-hand combat. It seemed impossible. But then, humans were impossible by coalition standards. Too strong, too fast, too willing to accept pain and injury if it meant protecting others. Commander Idris fought alongside the humans, his crystalline body ill-suited for combat but his presence steadying coalition forces. He watched humans employ tactics the coalition had never imagined. Controlled retreats that were actually ambushes, fake withdrawals that lured swarm into kill zones, coordinated fire that concentrated overwhelming force on single targets. "This is combined arms doctrine," Sam explained during a brief lull, breathing hard but still functional despite visible injuries. "We learned it fighting each other. Humans have been refining warfare for 10,000 years. The coalition has been peaceful for that long. We have expertise you never needed to develop. Until now," Idris said quietly. "Until now." The battle raged for 3 hours. Leo's explosives ran out after the first 40 minutes, forcing human volunteers to rely on improvised melee weapons and captured swarm body parts used as crude clubs. Isla's medical supplies dwindled to almost nothing, forcing her to improvise solutions that made coalition medical staff faint. But the evacuation ships launched one by one, carrying thousands of civilians to safety. Every minute humans held the line was another minute of lives saved. When the last ship lifted off, Sam gave the order to retreat. Human volunteers fell back in coordinated groups, covering each other, dragging wounded, refusing to leave anyone behind even when it meant accepting injuries to save others. The transport ships that had brought them to Virtus 3 descended through smoke and fire to extract them. As humans boarded, coalition observers counted. 200 had deployed. 193 were returning. 7 had died buying time for strangers they had never met. The transports lifted off, leaving Virtus 3 to the swarm. The colony was lost, but 23,000 civilians had been saved. By coalition standards, that was unprecedented. By human standards, it was just another mission. Luca sat in the transport, still holding his useless rifle, and watched the planet recede. They had been outgunned, outmaneuvered, given weapons that didn't work and equipment that wasn't designed for combat. They had improvised an entire battle plan on the fly, and they had won. Not won the colony, but won something more important. They had proven the swarm could be beaten. Commander Idris stood among the humans, his crystalline form showing stress fractures from the fighting. I have transmitted my full report to the Coalition Council. I have included tactical recordings, casualty figures, and my assessment. What assessment? Sam asked. That the Coalition has been fighting this war with one hand tied behind our backs, because we were too proud to admit we needed to learn violence. That humans have shown us what survival actually requires, that if we want to live, we must let the Deathworlders teach us. The transport docked with Station Harmony 6 hours later. As the ramp lowered, humans expected another clinical reception, more medical examinations, more Coalition judgment. Instead, they found hundreds of Coalition beings waiting, and the sound that greeted them was something translation software struggled to interpret. It took Isla a moment to understand. They were cheering. General Patricia Voss reviewed the manifest 3 times, not because she didn't believe the numbers, but because she wanted to remember this moment. After 2 centuries of humanity trying to appear peaceful enough to join the Coalition, Earth was about to ship enough weapons to arm a small war. Which was precisely what the Coalition needed. Railguns, plasma launchers, tactical missile systems, chemical propellant weapons in 7 calibers, explosive ordnance from fragmentation to fuel-air detonation. She looked up at David Ross, who had returned to Station Harmony to coordinate the arrival. The Coalition Council actually approved all of this? Ross nodded. After Virtus 3, the debate lasted about 10 minutes. Turns out watching humans hold off the swarm with mining equipment convinced them that proper weapons might be worth the ethical compromise. Patricia tasted the words and found them bitter. They're not compromising their ethics. They're outsourcing their violence to us. Does it matter? People are dying. If human weapons can stop that, I don't care about the philosophy. Patricia supposed he was right. She had spent 30 years in Earth's military, rising through ranks during the peaceful expansion era, when humanity's main enemy was vacuum and distance. She had trained for wars that never came, prepared for battles against enemies that didn't exist. Now, finally, her experience mattered. The first transport arrived 3 days later, and the reaction on Station Harmony was immediate. Coalition beings gathered to watch the unloading, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that translation software struggled to interpret. Most of the signals registered as fear. A Deepkin diplomat approached Patricia as human soldiers carefully moved crates through the docking bay. Are those truly necessary? They seem so aggressive. Patricia followed the diplomat's gaze to a railgun being secured to a transport platform. The weapon was designed to accelerate projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed using electromagnetic force. Its purpose was singular: to destroy whatever it aimed at. That weapon can punch through 10 meters of reinforced steel, Patricia explained, or through a swarm warrior's carapace at 3 kilometers distance. Yes, it's aggressive. That's the point. We have never needed such things. You were lucky. Patricia's tone carried no judgment, just statement of fact. You evolved on kind worlds and never met anyone who wanted to hurt you. Humans evolved on a world actively trying to kill us, and we met plenty of other humans who wanted to hurt us. We learned to make weapons because the alternative was extinction. The diplomat drifted away, and Patricia returned to coordinating the unloading. In addition to weapons, Earth had sent training personnel, tactical advisors, and manufacturing equipment. This wasn't a temporary deployment anymore. This was integration. Ambassador Trell found her later, his feathers showing more blue now, stress fading as hope grew. The Coalition Council has made you an offer. They want human military advisors integrated into Coalition defense forces on a permanent basis. In exchange for full Coalition membership for Earth, access to all technologies, trade networks, and jump gate systems. 3 seats on the High Council. Patricia absorbed that. Humanity had been trying to join the Coalition for 50 years. Now they were being offered not just membership, but significant political power, all because they knew how to kill efficiently. I'll forward the offer to Earth Command, but I already know the answer. We accept. Training academies were established within weeks. Sergeant Rita Huang found herself teaching hand-to-hand combat to Coalition species who had never struck another being in anger. It was challenging work. Their bodies were adapted for different things: flight, swimming, photosynthesis, but not for fighting. The goal isn't to make you human-level fighters, Rita explained to a class of 50 mixed species. The goal is to give you basic defensive skills and, more importantly, to change how you think about conflict. A Skyborn raised a wing. We are taught that violence is never the answer. Violence is a tool, Rita corrected. Like any tool, it can be used well or poorly, for good purposes or bad. You wouldn't say a hammer is never the answer. Sometimes you need to drive a nail. Sometimes you need to break something. The swarm is breaking you. We're teaching you how to break back. The Skyborn looked uncomfortable but didn't argue. Progress. Lieutenant Sam Foster worked with coalition military commanders, redesigning defensive strategies from the ground up. The session was not going smoothly. Your current doctrine focuses on presenting overwhelming force to discourage aggression, Sam said, trying to keep frustration from his voice. That works against rational actors who don't want casualties. The swarm is not rational. They don't care about losses. You need active defense. A Lithborn commander's harmonic suggested disagreement. Active defense implies offensive operations. We are defenders, not aggressors. You're prey, Sam said bluntly. The swarm sees you as food. Until you're willing to hurt them back, that's all you'll ever be. The harsh truth silenced the room. Sam pulled up tactical displays showing swarm attack patterns from the past year. They're getting bolder because you've never made an attack costly. Every planet they take, they lose nothing but expendable drones. We need to change that calculus. Make them pay for every world. Make them fear you. Fear. The Lithborn's harmonics climbed. We do not wish to be feared. Then you wish to be extinct. Pick one. Commander Idris intervened, his presence calming the rising tension. Since Virtus III, Idris had become humanity's advocate in coalition military circles. He understood what the others were still struggling to accept. Lieutenant Foster is correct, Idris said. I witnessed human combat doctrine on Virtus III. They did not fight with hatred or aggression. They fought with purpose. Every action served survival, their own and those they protected. This is what we must learn. Private Owen Blake found his calling in the engineering corps, teaching coalition technicians how to weaponize civilian technology. His youth and enthusiasm made him approachable, and his genuine excitement about explosives was somehow infectious. Any chemical compound with sufficient energy density can become a weapon, Owen explained to a group of engineers. Your fusion containment systems? That's a bomb if you remove the safety protocols. Your industrial plasma systems? Those are cannons. Your construction equipment? Those are combat vehicles. You have the tools. You just never thought of them as weapons. A small furred engineer, species designation Softpaw, raised a hesitant paw. Is this not dangerous knowledge? Absolutely. Owen's grin was pure human. But the swarm is more dangerous. Knowledge can be dangerous or safe depending on who holds it and why. You'll use it to protect people. That makes it worth the risk. Medical Officer Isla Wright established a combat medicine training program that horrified coalition medical professionals and saved lives in equal measure. Her first class included 30 coalition medical staff who volunteered to learn human techniques. Coalition medicine is beautiful, Isla began. It's gentle, careful, minimizes trauma. It's perfect for peaceful times. But in combat, gentleness kills. You need to be fast and aggressive. You need to accept causing pain if it means preserving life. She demonstrated on a training dummy, showing incision techniques that made several students faint. This looks brutal. It is brutal, but it works when time matters more than comfort. Your careful techniques require stable environments and time. Combat gives you neither. A Deepkin medical officer watched with horror and fascination. You would truly cut into a living being like that? I have, multiple times. On Virtus III, I saved 12 coalition casualties using these techniques. Your medical staff had already declared them unsavable. Human combat medicine isn't pretty, but it gets people home alive. The first major test of the new integrated forces came at the Threshold system, gateway to the coalition core worlds. Intelligence reported a massive swarm fleet gathering for an assault. This was the line that could not break. General Voss coordinated the defense from a command ship orbiting Threshold Prime. Beside her, coalition military commanders watched as human doctrine was implemented on a massive scale. We have 3,000 human troops, 15,000 coalition soldiers trained in basic human tactics, and full access to human weapon systems, Patricia summarized. The swarm is bringing an estimated 50,000 drones. Ordinarily, that would be overwhelming odds. Ordinarily, Commander Idris's harmonics suggested he understood where this was going. Ordinarily, you would fight the way you've always fought. Defensively, reactively, trying to minimize casualties on both sides. We're not doing that. We're going to hit them with everything we have in ways they don't expect, using weapons they've never encountered. The swarm fleet arrived in a coordinated wave, their bioships pulsing with hideous life. They had never encountered coordinated resistance before. They were about to learn what Deathworlders could do when properly armed. Patricia gave the order. All ships open fire. Show them what an arsenal looks like. Railguns spoke first, their projectiles invisible until impact. Swarm bioships erupted as hypersonic rounds punched through their organic hulls. Plasma launchers followed. Superheated matter burning through the vacuum to consume swarm vessels and miniature suns. Missile systems deployed. Smart ordnance tracking targets and adjusting trajectories mid-flight. The swarm had never experienced this. Their tactics assumed enemies would use ineffective pulse weapons and retreat. Instead, they faced coordinated destruction from weapons designed by species who had spent millennia learning to kill each other. Coalition commanders watched in shocked silence as swarm ships died by the dozens. Human weapons weren't elegant. They were efficient. They reduced enemies to debris with cold precision. Ground forces are deploying, Sam reported. Mixed human coalition units, integrated command structure, combined arms assault. Sergeant Rita led her unit onto Threshold Prime's surface where swarm ground forces had landed. Her team included 10 humans and 20 coalition soldiers who had completed basic training. They moved with surprising coordination. Remember your training, Rita called out. Humans take point. Coalition provides support fire and intelligence. We hit hard, we hit fast, we don't give them time to adapt. The engagement was brutal and brief. Human weapons chewed through swarm warriors while coalition soldiers provided tactical support, medical aid, and coordination. It wasn't perfect. Coalition troops still hesitated, still fought their peaceful instincts, but it was effective. Private Luca Moreno found elevated position and began systematic elimination of swarm command clusters. His rifle, a human-designed precision weapon, could kill at distances coalition species considered impossible. Each shot disrupted swarm coordination, created confusion in their hive mind tactical network. This is why humans developed ranged weapons, Luca explained to his coalition spotter, a skyborn with exceptional vision. We couldn't match larger predators in close combat, so we learned to kill from safety. Evolution made us creative hunters. The battle raged for 3 weeks. Not 3 hours like previous engagements, but 3 full weeks of sustained combat. Human endurance became the deciding factor. Coalition species needed frequent rest, specific environmental conditions, careful management of energy. Humans just kept fighting, sleeping in shifts, eating while mobile, pushing past exhaustion through sheer determination. The swarm, for the first time in the war, began withdrawing, not because they were destroyed, but because continued assault was costing them resources with no gain. They had met resistance they couldn't simply overwhelm. When the last swarm ship limped away from Threshold System, Station Harmony erupted in celebration. The Coalition had held a major system against overwhelming odds. Humanity had proven that the swarm could be beaten. Ambassador Trell stood on Station Harmony's observation deck, watching human ships patrol the perimeter. Beside him, General Voss reviewed casualty reports. We lost 300 humans, Patricia said quietly, and almost 2,000 Coalition troops. That's better than we hoped, worse than I wanted. 300 humans volunteered to die for species they barely knew, Trell replied. I will remember every name. They didn't volunteer to die. They volunteered to fight. Big difference. Trell's feathers rustled. General, may I ask a personal question? Go ahead. Are humans afraid when they fight? Patricia considered that. Terrified. Fear is healthy. It keeps you sharp. The difference is, humans learn to function through fear. We act despite being afraid, not because we're not afraid. That is courage. That is survival. On Earth, courage was the price of existence. Below them, Coalition younglings watched human soldiers teach defensive formations, a new generation growing up learning that peace sometimes required the capacity for violence. The Coalition was changing, shaped by human influence into something harder, more resilient. Trell wondered if they had made the right choice, inviting Deathworlders into their civilization. Then he remembered the 53 worlds already lost, the trillions already dead, and knew there had been no choice at all. The swarm was not defeated, but for the first time they had been hurt. And humanity was just getting started. Dr. Ellis Ward stared at the quantum scan results until his eyes burned, but the data didn't change. The swarm wasn't just a collection of mindless insects following biological programming. There was intelligence behind it, singular and vast, coordinating millions of drones across dozens of star systems simultaneously. Somewhere in the depths of swarm territory, a queen existed, and she was thinking. "This changes everything," Ellis said to the research team assembled in Station Harmony's xenobiology lab. Around him, scientists from 6 different species reviewed the same data with growing dread. "We've been treating them like a natural disaster, a plague. But this is a war against an intelligent opponent." Dr. Nadia Petrov leaned over the display, her predator's focus intense. "If there's a central intelligence, that's a vulnerability. Cut off the head and the body dies. Or it adapts," Ellis countered. "We don't know how the hive mind functions at that scale. There might be redundancy, subsidiary queens, backup systems." Commander Idris entered the lab, his crystalline body refracting the harsh laboratory lights. "Long-range scans have detected the main swarm fleet. They are massing near the outer rim. Coordinates transmitted to your systems. Fleet composition suggests they are preparing for a final assault on Station Harmony itself." The room fell silent. Station Harmony was more than just the Coalition capital. It was the symbolic heart of their civilization, home to 20 million beings from 47 species. If it fell, the Coalition would shatter. General Patricia Voss arrived minutes later, and her expression told Ellis everything he needed to know. Earth Command had already run the numbers. Station Harmony couldn't be defended against the incoming fleet. "Coalition High Council is debating evacuation," Patricia said without preamble. "Conservative estimates give us 2 weeks before the swarm arrives. We can save maybe 60% of the station's population if we start evacuating now, and abandon the other 40%. Ambassador Trell's feathers had gone gray again, all the hope that had been building over the past months draining away. 8 million souls left to die? Or we make a stand here and lose everyone," Patricia replied. "I'm not saying I like the options. I'm saying those are the only options military analysis gives us." Ellis looked back at his data. The Swarm Queen, controlling everything from some hidden world deep in their territory. A singular point of failure in what seemed like an unstoppable force. "There's a third option," Ellis said slowly. "We don't defend. We attack." Every eye in the room turned to him. Rita Huang, who had been quietly reviewing tactical readouts, spoke first. "Offense? We barely hold our own positions. How are we supposed to attack into swarm territory? We don't attack their fleet. We attack their queen." Ellis pulled up star charts showing the vast region of space the swarm had consumed. "She has to be somewhere in here. Find her location, kill her, and maybe the entire swarm dies with her." "That's a lot of maybes," Lieutenant Sam Foster observed. "And even if it works, how do we find her? That's hundreds of systems to search, all of them crawling with swarm drones. We follow the signals." Ellis highlighted his quantum scan data. "The Queen coordinates the swarm through some kind of faster-than-light communication. Pheromones wouldn't work across star systems. This is something else, possibly quantum entanglement on a biological scale. If we can track those signals, we can find the source." Captain David Ross studied the star charts with a naval officer's eye. "Even if we locate her, getting there means traveling through the heart of swarm territory. We'd need a stealth fleet, minimum crew, one-way mission. The chances of anyone coming back are essentially 0. Then we need volunteers who accept that," Patricia said quietly. Ellis felt his stomach twist. This was his plan, his idea. If people died because of it, that blood would be on his hands. But if they did nothing, millions would die anyway. At least this way there was a chance. The High Council met in emergency session. For 12 hours, Coalition leadership debated the proposal while precious time slipped away. Some argued that sending military forces on a suicide mission violated every principle the Coalition had been built on. Others countered that allowing millions to die while they maintained their principles was an even greater betrayal. Ambassador Trell finally rose to speak, his voice carrying the weight of all the death he had witnessed. "We asked humans for help because we could not save ourselves. They came, they fought, they died for us. Now we debate whether we should let them die trying to save us one more time, and that debate makes me ashamed." High Chancellor Oren's aquatic form rippled with emotion. "What would you have us do?" "Stop hiding behind philosophy and make the hard choice. Authorize the mission. Give them every resource we have. And if they succeed, remember that peace was purchased with violence we were too proud to commit ourselves. The vote was called. It passed by a narrow margin. General Voss assembled the mission team personally. 50 humans, 20 coalition volunteers, 3 experimental stealth ships equipped with the best technology 2 civilizations could produce. Every volunteer knew the parameters. This was almost certainly a one-way trip. Captain David Ross volunteered immediately. Sam Foster followed. Rita Huang, Leo Grant, Owen Blake, Luca Moreno, all the veterans from Virtus 3 stepped forward without hesitation. Medical Officer Isla Wright packed supplies that would probably be inadequate and volunteered anyway. Dr. Ellis Ward felt obligated to volunteer since this was his plan, though his combat experience was exactly 0. Dr. Nadia Petrov volunteered to keep him alive. Commander Idris volunteered because he had witnessed human courage and refused to let them face death alone. The night before departure, David Ross recorded a message to his daughter back on Earth. She was 12 years old and wouldn't understand why her father had chosen to die for aliens in a distant part of the galaxy, but someday she would read this message and maybe then she would understand. "We're not doing this because we're brave," David said to the recording device. "We're doing it because someone has to, and we have the skills to try. That's what humans do. We see a problem and we try to fix it, even when the cost is everything. Remember that. Remember us." Similar messages were recorded throughout the volunteer force. 50 humans and 20 coalition beings, all facing the same certainty of death, all finding their own ways to say goodbye. The ships launched at dawn, slipping away from Station Harmony while evacuation efforts continued. If the mission failed, at least the evacuation would save some lives. If the mission succeeded, well, Ellis tried not to think too hard about the odds. Travel through swarm territory was a nightmare of stealth and luck. The ship's experimental shielding masked their energy signatures, but they still had to navigate through systems choked with swarm bioships. Any detection meant certain death. Ellis worked continuously, tracking the quantum signals that he believed would lead to the Queen. The patterns were complex, layered, beautiful in their way. This was intelligence expressing itself through biology, and under different circumstances, Ellis would have found it fascinating. Now it just filled him with dread. "She's brilliant," Ellis admitted to Nadia during one of their brief rest periods. "The way she coordinates across this distance, managing millions of drones, orchestrating attacks across dozens of systems simultaneously. It's genius-level intelligence using biological systems we don't even understand." "And we're going to kill her," Nadia said flatly. "Yes," Ellis couldn't meet her eyes. "We're going to commit genocide against a species that might be the most remarkable biological achievement in the galaxy, because that remarkable achievement is eating civilizations. Doesn't make it feel any better," Sam Foster called a briefing on the 3rd week of their journey. They had penetrated deep into swarm territory, far beyond any coalition ship had ever traveled. Ellis's tracking data had finally triangulated the Queen's location, a planet-sized organic structure orbiting a red dwarf star. "We estimate 50 million swarm drones on and around the Queen's world," Sam explained, showing scans that made several coalition volunteers visibly recoil. "Defenses are total. We'll never fight our way through." "So we don't fight," Leo Grant said. "We sneak. 3 ships, skeleton crews use every stealth trick we have. Get close enough to deploy the payload." The payload was 60 fusion warheads jury-rigged into a single planet cracker device. Owen Blake had designed it and Leo had built it. If it worked, it would crack the Queen's world like an egg. If it didn't work, they would all die for nothing. "There's something you should know," Ellis said quietly. "I've been analyzing the Queen's communication patterns. She's been trying to contact me telepathically." The room went silent. Rita's hand dropped to her sidearm instinctively, though what good a gun would do against telepathy was unclear. "What has she said?" Commander Idris asked, his harmonics tightly controlled. "That she's not evil. That the swarm is fleeing a dying galaxy, looking for resources to survive. That the coalition space was simply in the way." Ellis pulled up the quantum scans showing the desperate pattern of swarm expansion. "She's not a monster. She's a refugee leading her species toward survival. We're just the natives who happen to be in the way." David Ross stood slowly. "Does that change anything?" Ellis wanted to say yes, wanted to argue that understanding meant negotiation was possible, But he had seen the coalition worlds the swarm had consumed, had reviewed the casualty figures, had watched footage of swarm drones tearing through civilians. Understanding didn't erase those deaths. No, Ellis said, the word tasting like ash. It doesn't change anything. She can't coexist. Her species survives by consuming everything in their path. Maybe she's sympathetic, but she's still choosing her species over ours. Then we choose ours over hers, Patricia said. That's what war is. Competing survival imperatives. Someone has to lose. The ships approached the Queen's world using the red dwarf's radiation to mask their signatures. They passed through defensive perimeters that would have shredded any conventional vessel, relying entirely on experimental technology and desperate hope. Ellis felt the Queen's presence in his mind growing stronger. She wasn't threatening. She was pleading, explaining, trying to make him understand. Her species had evolved in a galaxy of scarcity, where cooperation meant death. Only the swarm's hive mind efficiency had allowed them to survive. Now their home galaxy was dying, radiation poisoned and resource depleted. They had no choice but to expand or face extinction. "I'm sorry," Ellis whispered, though whether he was apologizing to the Queen or to himself he wasn't sure. "I'm so sorry." The 3 ships reached deployment range. Leo and Owen activated the planet cracker device. 60 fusion warheads began their cascade sequence. They had 10 minutes to escape before detonation. David Ross gave the evacuation order, and the ships attempted to withdraw. 2 made it past the defensive perimeter, 1 didn't. Private Luca Moreno and 8 others died in an instant, their ship consumed by swarm bioweapons. Ellis felt the Queen's mental scream as the warheads detonated. It wasn't rage or hatred, it was grief. Boundless and terrible, the death cry of a being watching her entire species die. The Queen's world cracked apart, its organic structure rupturing, atmosphere venting into space. Deep below the surface, the Queen herself died, her vast intelligence snuffed out in seconds. And across Coalition space, something remarkable happened. Every swarm drone on every world and every ship simultaneously stopped functioning. The hive mind died with its Queen, leaving nothing but empty biological shells. The 2 surviving ships limped back to Coalition space, battered but functional. 50 volunteers had departed. 37 returned. 13 had died buying survival for the Coalition. Station Harmony greeted them as heroes. The evacuation halted. The war was over. Humanity had saved the Coalition, at a cost measured in lives and moral compromise. General Voss stood at the memorial service for the fallen, surrounded by Coalition and human mourners. Ambassador Trell spoke eloquently about sacrifice. Commander Idris testified to human courage. But Ellis Ward just felt hollow. They had won. The Coalition was saved. But somewhere out there, a species that had fought desperately for survival had been exterminated. And Ellis couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps both sides had been right in this war. Perhaps that was what made victory taste so bitter. Reconstruction took 6 months, but the changes ran deeper than repairing damaged stations and resettling refugees. The Coalition itself had been fundamentally transformed, and there was no returning to what it had been before humans arrived. Ambassador Trell walked through the rebuilt sections of Station Harmony, watching younglings from a dozen species practice defensive formations under human instruction. A skyborn child executed a basic strike pattern while her human teacher, a young corporal named Sarah Lynn, corrected her stance with patient encouragement. "Good. But remember to use your wings for momentum," Sarah explained. "You're built differently than I am. Use those advantages." The Skyborn adjusted her approach, and her next strike showed visible improvement.
She chirped excitedly, and Sarah grinned.
Neither seemed bothered by the fact that they were learning violence. For them, it was simply practical education like mathematics or navigation. Trell felt his feathers ruffle uncomfortably. This was the future they had built. Coalition children learning from Deathworlders how to hurt others. Was this progress or corruption? High Chancellor Oren found him there, her translucent form rippling with something that might have been satisfaction, or might have been regret. The Council votes today on the permanent integration proposal. 3 human seats, full military cooperation, joint defense doctrine. Trell had reviewed the proposal a dozen times. We are making them equal partners in governance. After what they have done, they deserve nothing less. Do they? Or are we simply acknowledging that we cannot survive without them? Oren considered that with the careful thought her species was known for. Perhaps both are true. They saved us, yes. But more than that, they changed us. We were pacifists not from moral superiority but from privilege. We never had to be anything else. Humans showed us what survival requires when the universe is hostile. The council chambers filled slowly, representatives from 47 species taking their traditional positions. 3 new seats had been added. Earth's seats, though they remained empty for now. Waiting for official acceptance of the integration treaty, General Patricia Voss, Captain David Ross, and Dr. Nadia Petrov waited in an antechamber, all 3 wearing formal uniforms that somehow looked out of place in the Coalition's aesthetic of flowing robes and bioluminescent displays. They were still soldiers, still deathworlders, even dressed for politics. "Last chance to back out," Nadia said lightly, though her tension showed in how she held herself. Patricia shook her head. "Earth Command wants this. Hell, Earth wants this. 50 years of trying to join the Coalition peacefully, and we finally get in by being the most violent species they've ever met. The irony is not lost on anyone." "Do you think they'll ever really accept us?" David asked. "Or will we always be the dangerous ones they keep around for emergencies? Does it matter? We're in. We have voice in galactic governance. Our children will grow up as citizens of a multi-species civilization. That was always the goal." The council session began with formal acknowledgments of the fallen, human, and coalition names read aloud in a ceremony that lasted almost an hour. 13 humans had died in the final mission. 2,000 had died throughout the campaign. 40,000 coalition soldiers and civilians had perished. Each name deserved remembrance. When the recitation ended, High Chancellor Oren spoke. "We gather to vote on Earth's full integration into coalition governance, including 3 permanent seats on this council, and formalization of joint military command. Before we vote, I would hear from those who oppose." A Lith-born representative rose, its crystalline body catching light in sharp angles. "I do not oppose Earth's membership, but I question what we are becoming. We have always been builders, philosophers, seekers of knowledge. Now we train our children for war. We construct weapons. We discuss acceptable casualties. Have we lost ourselves?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through several delegations. The question hung heavy in the chamber. Ambassador Trell stood, surprising himself. He had not planned to speak. "The representative raises valid concerns," Trell began, his voice carrying despite his small stature. "We have changed. We are no longer the civilization we were 3 years ago. We have learned violence, learned to fight, learned to kill. But I ask this, are we less than we were, or are we more?" He gestured to displays showing casualty figures from the war. "Before humans came, we were dying. 53 worlds consumed, trillions dead. And our response was to debate ethics while the swarm ate us alive. We had the luxury of pacifism only because nothing had ever truly threatened us. When that threat arrived, our philosophy provided no defense." Trell pulled up images from Virtus 3 of humans holding impossible positions to save coalition civilians. Humans showed us that violence is not inherently evil. It is a tool, and like any tool, its morality depends on purpose. We learned to fight not because we wanted to hurt others, but because we wanted to protect our own. That is not corruption, that is growth. Commander Idris rose to speak, his harmonics measured and precise. "I fought alongside humans. I watched them face overwhelming odds without hesitation. But I also watched them grieve for enemies they had killed. They carry the weight of violence in ways we are only beginning to understand. They do not glorify war. They endure it because alternatives are worse." Dr. Ellis Ward, seated in the observer section, felt that weight acutely. He still dreamed about the Swarm Queen's final moments, her telepathic death cry echoing in his mind. Victory hadn't erased that guilt. Sergeant Rita Huang sat beside him, her combat decorations looking almost garish against her formal uniform. She had killed more swarm warriors than any other human, had led charges that saved thousands of lives, and now served as chief combat instructor for coalition forces. But Ellis knew she still struggled with nightmares. "Humans pay a price for their violence," Ellis had told her once. "Better us than you," Rita had replied. "We're built for this. You're not." The vote was called. Integration passed with 73% approval. General Patricia Voss, Captain David Ross, and Dr. Nadia Petrov were formally escorted to their new seats on the High Council. For the first time in coalition history, a predator species had voice in galactic governance. Patricia's first official act was to propose a memorial structure listing every casualty from the war, Human and coalition names intermingled without distinction. The council approved unanimously. Over the following months, the new normal established itself. Human military advisors became permanent fixtures in coalition defense forces. Mixed species crews became standard on military vessels. Coalition younglings grew up learning both philosophy and tactics, gentleness and vigilance. Lieutenant Sam Foster accepted a teaching position at the new Coalition Military Academy, where he trained the next generation of officers in combined arms doctrine. His students included beings who would have fainted at the sight of blood 3 years ago, and now executed tactical maneuvers with competent efficiency. Medical Officer Isla Wright pioneered hybrid medical techniques that combined coalition gentleness with human aggression, creating protocols that were both effective and less traumatic than pure human combat medicine. Her work saved countless lives and earned her a Coalition Medical Excellence Award. Private Owen Blake, no longer a private but a lieutenant and engineering specialist, helped design the Coalition's new defense stations. They were beautiful structures that incorporated both Coalition aesthetics and human fortification principles, works of art that could also withstand sustained assault. Sergeant Leo Grant trained Coalition demolition experts, teaching them not just how to destroy but when destruction served a greater purpose. His students learned that sometimes breaking things was necessary to protect what mattered. The skyborn child that Trell had watched training with Sarah Lynn became one of the first Coalition youths to qualify for advanced combat certification. Her parents attended the ceremony with mixed feelings, pride in her accomplishments, discomfort with what she had learned. She will never need these skills, her father said hopefully. The swarm is defeated. The war is over. Trell watched the young skyborn demonstrate her techniques with precision and grace. Perhaps, but if another threat comes, she will be ready. That is what humans have given us, not just the ability to fight, but the readiness to do so. Earth itself underwent transformation. Joining the Coalition brought access to technologies that accelerated development by centuries. Fusion power replaced fossil fuels. Jumpgate technology connected Earth to dozens of worlds. Human settlements spread across the galaxy, no longer limited to slow colony ships. But humanity also faced its own reckoning. They were no longer alone in the universe, no longer the dominant intelligence. They were part of something larger, and that required adjustments to how humans saw themselves. David Ross returned to Earth for the first time in 3 years, visiting his daughter, who was now 15 and fascinated by the Coalition species she saw in news feeds. She wanted to study xenobiology, wanted to travel to other worlds, wanted to be part of the future her father had helped build. "Do you regret it?" she asked him during a quiet moment. "All the people who died?" David considered that carefully. His daughter deserved honesty, not comfortable lies, every day. "But I don't regret the choice. We had to act, and action meant risk. 13 humans died in the final mission, but millions of Coalition beings lived because we took that risk. The mathematics of that don't make it easier, but they make it necessary." Is that what being human means? Making the hard choices? Being human means lots of things. But yeah, sometimes it means doing what needs doing even when the cost is terrible. 5 years after the war ended, the Coalition dedicated the memorial that Patricia had proposed. It stood in the center of Station Harmony's main plaza, a towering structure of crystal and metal listing every name of every casualty. 13,000 names total, each one representing a life given in defense of strangers. The dedication ceremony drew representatives from every Coalition species. Human and Coalition leaders spoke about sacrifice, courage, and the price of peace. But the most powerful moment came when Dr. Ellis Ward spoke, his voice carrying to thousands of attendees. "We remember the fallen today," Ellis said, "but I ask that we also remember those we fought against." The swarm was intelligent, desperate, fighting for survival in the only way they knew how. "We killed them because we had no choice, but we should not pretend they were simply monsters. They were a species trying to survive, and we chose our survival over theirs. That choice was necessary, but it was not without cost. We carry the weight of that extinction." Silence followed his words. Some in the audience looked uncomfortable with the moral complexity he introduced. Others nodded slowly, accepting the burden of what had been done. Ambassador Trell approached Ellis after the ceremony. That was a difficult thing to say. It needed saying. We can't pretend victory was pure or simple. If we forget the swarm were intelligent beings, we become the monsters we feared we might be. You think we made the wrong choice? No, I think we made the only choice available. That doesn't make it the right choice. Sometimes there are no right choices, only necessary ones. Trell's feathers rippled with thought. You are very wise for a human. Ellis laughed bitterly. Humans aren't wise. We're experienced. We've been making terrible choices for survival for millennia. We're just good at living with the consequences. In the years that followed, Coalition space expanded again, slowly reclaiming worlds the swarm had consumed. Human coalition teams worked together, terraforming dead planets back to life, turning grave sites into new beginnings. The defensive networks held. No major threats emerged. The peace that humans had fought for actually arrived, and it was strange and uncomfortable for those who had lived through the war. Rita Huang retired from active service and opened a small training facility on a colony world, teaching self-defense to anyone who wanted to learn. Her students were mostly coalition civilians who had never experienced violence but wanted to know they could defend themselves if needed. One of her students, an elderly Deepkin, asked her once why she continued teaching after the war ended. Because peace doesn't mean safety, Rita explained. It just means no current war. The universe is big and full of things we don't understand. Better to be ready and not need it than need it and not be ready. Is that human philosophy? That's survivor philosophy. Humans just learned it earlier than most. 10 years after the war, the Coalition encountered another species, peaceful explorers from a distant arm of the galaxy. The first contact protocols were designed by a mixed human coalition team, incorporating both Coalition's welcoming nature and humans' cautious vigilance. The new species, calling themselves the Wanderers, were fascinated by the Coalition's structure. When they learned humans were deathworlders who had fought and won a major war, they requested to meet some veterans. David Ross, now retire,